Thank you.
I want to be able to go back to my office and say, I was chatting with Clay Shirky and he told me X. So
oh, I don't know, Yankees in 4.
I think it's safe to say we all work for philanthropic foundations. Most of us have websites. I think it's also fair to say that those websites are in a state of transition right now. They probably, most of them started their existence as a kind of wall announcing the work that we do, our grantees, our various initiatives. Over time, they morphed. They may have added features like a blog, or podcasts, or webcasts. And at some point, I think in the organizational history of most of our institutions, there comes a time when there's a bit of a tension between programs and communications over the question of how transparent, how interactive do we want our public face to be? Do we put a blog out there that rehearses and rehashes in real time before an unknowable audience all of the cogitations that we're going through as we try to formulate directions and policy initiatives for our organization? Or do we want those things to be decided behind closed doors and presented as a kind of fait accompli to the public? And I guess my question for you, and this may be a little bit outside your area of expertise, is how do we sell the idea that transparency and interactivity, putting out a really good, strong website is important for what we do as foundations?
It's such an interesting question, and one of the things I think that's gone wrong with this conversation is that on the side of my tribe there is a cult of openness as an absolute, right? Where, I mean, the two choices you outlined are pretty Manichaean, right? You're either Stalin or you're a commune. If there's no choices between those, I'm having a hard time imagining, So the question, I think, has to be posed not in terms of do we suddenly open everything all the time, at which point just the overhead of doing all that communicating becomes a drain on the resources. Or do you say, do we become more transparent than we are today, and in what direction, and around what experiments? I think the best argument you can make for that is that in the landscape outside the organization, communications is no longer about public relations or controlling the message or whatever. The loss of control you fear is already in the past, right? The conversation is going on now, and you're participating even if you're just being silent because you're now in a meeting where you could participate. And so if you're choosing to sit it out, that becomes quite different from we didn't happen to issue a press release today in the press release sphere. The flip side value, though, so that just seems like nothing but bad news. The flip side value is that the convening function has turned out to be phenomenally important in all of these, in all of these uses, right? Both Facebook as a platform and Streeting's use of it, Nisha Susan's decision to found the Association of Blue Sport and pub-going women. All of that was a way to let people who had other different motivations come in and contribute some way, large or small. And I think the thing that pushes in the direction of more openness and more transparency is not this will make us able to do our communications function better, but rather this will make the communications function matter in more places and produce more value than it did when it was just our external interface to the world. So rather than thinking, well, we have blogs and wikis, we have Twitter, and what should we get next? A different place to start is to figure out where your users are. Not, the question, should I have a Facebook page, is really a question, are a lot of people who care about what you do on Facebook? And if the answer is no, then no, don't bother having a Facebook page. If the answer is yes, then think about it. Ditto Twitter, ditto weblog. But if you can figure out where the people you want to be talking to are and give them the tools to take the things you're saying and redistribute them, syndicate them on your behalf for free, you start to get not just new ways of doing outbound communications, which the 20th century was voluptuously provisioned already, but new ways of learning back from what people are doing. There's a really concrete example of this out in the market right now, the Flip video camera. Very cheap, plugs into the USB port. I think a lot of people probably have them. The Flip video camera came because CVS was selling disposable video cameras, and people were buying them and then not bringing them back. They were just cracking open the back and jamming wires in and trying to get the video off, or just taking a video and using the little screen, like, oh, look, here's you with the third margarita, or whatever. And for a while, the company said, oh my God, this is a failure. We don't have the message right. We have to get the message out that these are disposable. It turned out the problem wasn't messaging. The problem was that the product they were selling wasn't something people wanted. And there was no amount of messaging that could change that. And when they flipped the communication sign, they said, what if we think of the users as communicating to us? All of a sudden they say, hey, there's a market here for video cameras. And the flip came out of not the outbound communications channel, what we think about it, but the reaction to it. So I would say to your comment about should we be transparent about what we're thinking about, yes, to the degree that what other people you respect outside your organization would change that thing. If the answer is not at all, don't share it. Right? There's certain imperatives that are just ours within the four walls. But if it's really, we're thinking through these issues and we want some feedback, it's the upstream communication channel that's the big channel.